That's never happened before. Okay. All right. Well, tonight we're talking about Mormonism, and I'll use the term Mormonism just because that's typically the phraseology that people use referring to the group, but they really prefer to be referred to as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or LDS, right? So just so we're yeah, so that we're keeping that in mind. I don't. Most of the time, they won't be offended, but they'll say we really prefer to be it's LDS, or So that's kind of what we're talking about here. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is, well, in a lot of ways, it's really interesting. This is going to be the first of the world religions that we're talking about that had its beginning in the United States of America, which is kind of interesting. And as we dig into the history there, it really comes out of this, in the early 1800s, there was this movement going on that we're going to call American Revivalism. Essentially, what American Revivalism was trying to do is trying to revive Christianity. So the churches in the United States were kind of getting a little bit stagnant, and so there were a few prominent people across the board in Christianity that were kind of pushing for revival. They would go out and they would have these big rallies where they would give these big emotional speeches to kind of fire people up and bring them back into church. And the results of American revivalism were kind of a lot of people ended up coming back to church. A lot of people were filling the churches, but it was kind of a shallow movement because American revivalism was very much based on the emotions. So these revivalist speakers would get you all fired up, and they would get people excited to come back to church and to get involved with Christianity again. But for a lot of people, that's as far as it went. It wasn't a growth of digging deeper into the scriptures and understanding God's truth. It was just this is something that we're excited about right now. We're fired up, and that's kind of American revivalism. There you can see some of that stuff going on still today in a lot of American congregations, but that's not what we're talking about today. So that's kind of the environment that we're in the year 1823. In the state of New York, there's a young man named Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was kind of one of those people that was fired up by this revivalism movement. So he was kind of starting to get involved with the Christian scene. It seems from people who knew him and who wrote down things about him, it seems like Joseph Smith was a pretty smart guy. But much more than being a smart guy, he was extremely charismatic and pretty narcissistic as well. So Joseph Smith, in the year 1823, he has a dream that an angel named Moroni appears to him. And again, like I said 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about Islam, and I said, I'm not sure that I would say that this is wrong, that an angel appeared to Muhammad. I just don't think it was Gabriel. I'm going to say the same thing here. I think it's entirely possible that an angel appeared to Joseph Smith and introduced himself as Moroni. I think we would prefer to call that angel Satan, but this is what can happen. And so in this vision, the angel that identifies himself as Moroni appears to Joseph Smith, and Moroni tells Joseph Smith that in the state of New York, he gives him the place. There are these golden plates that are hidden, and Joseph Smith needs to go and find them, but he doesn't find them for 4 more years. In 1827, that's when he uncovers these golden plates that are hidden on a hill in New York, and it's from these golden plates that he transcribes or translates the Book of Mormon. Apparently, the writing on these golden plates it was like Egyptian hieroglyphics, and he had to translate them and write them down into what became the Book of Mormon.
It was similar to, or it was Egyptian?
It was similar to.
Okay.
Right. So that's kind of how he described it. Yeah.
Do we know if they were real thing? I would say these are real or is this his claim?
Nobody ever saw the golden plates except for Joseph Smith. Right. They are not in a vault in Salt Lake City. Some people might tell you that they are, but they are not. Nobody has ever seen the golden plates except for Joseph Smith.
Is how do you say it again?
Moroni.
Is that like people that we know of that we've ever heard of, or is that?
No. I'll tell you who Moroni is a little bit later.
Okay, sorry.
Well, we'll get to that. Moroni, that's entirely possible. It's probably you're probably right. So we'll say yes. So every LDS temple has a statue of Moroni up top with a trumpet pointed to heaven. So with those golden plates, Joseph Smith transcribes the Book of Mormon, and there in New York, he begins what he calls the Church of Christ. He's later going to change the name to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So the movement is beginning. Joseph Smith is gathering followers for himself, starting this new brand of, he's going to call it Christianity. We probably wouldn't call it that, but that's what's going on. They're not very popular, this group of people in New York. So just a year later in 1831, this group, these Latter-day Saints, they're going to be driven out of the state of New York. And from there, they're going to move from New York to Ohio. And while they are in Ohio, it's going to be revealed to Joseph Smith that Independence, Missouri is going to be the New Jerusalem. Okay, so the Mormons, they start moving from Ohio to Independence, Missouri, and that's where they want to settle in. They're going to build a temple there. They're going to start a community there. These are all the plans that they have, because this is going to be the New Jerusalem. This is the place where Jesus is going to return to when he returns to establish his earthly kingdom. So this is going to be kind of the capital of Joseph Smith's new church. I don't think so. Some probably do. Some probably do. There are splinters of the Mormon church. After Joseph Smith died, the church kind of split up, and the vast majority of Mormons followed Brigham Young out west. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but there were a couple other groups that did not, and so they kind of their belief systems kind of vary a little bit. Yeah, so I would suspect there are still some that believe that, but for the majority, I don't think so. In 1833, still the Mormons are not very popular. They are asked to leave Jackson County, Missouri, and the reason why people keep asking them to leave is because in Joseph Smith's mind, this Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's kind of supposed to be an all-encompassing thing, right? So they're trying to kind of set up their own communities. Joseph Smith, everywhere he goes, he kind of has his own private army kind of a thing, and that doesn't really go over very well with the people of Missouri. So they say, look, you guys got to get out of here. We don't want, there's too many Mormons here. You guys got to go somewhere else. Well, the Mormons say, no, we're not going to leave Jackson County. And that gets a little nasty. The people of Jackson County they kind of forcibly push them out. A few higher up people in the Mormon church are actually tarred and feathered at this point in time to really get them to move out of Jackson County. And so they end up moving further west in Missouri, just to a different spot. And that's kind of their new spot where they're going to settle in this western town. They don't get along with the people there either. And in 1838, 5 years later, in August, what's called the Missouri Mormon War is going to begin. And that's just little clashes between the people of Missouri and the Mormon community. They kind of start to escalate, and things are getting worse and worse. Joseph Smith is really not helping with this because Joseph Smith at this point in time kind of sees himself as the new Muhammad. Remember when we talked about Islam, Muhammad is run out of town and then he comes back with his army to kind of beat back all the people and take over by force. Joseph Smith is saying like, well, that's nothing compared to what I'm going to do. And so he's kind of encouraging this kind of hostility. And as a result of that, he's going to be arrested. Later, that's just a few months later. In October, Joseph Smith is arrested and he's going to surrender. And that's going to be the end of the war. So the Mormons got to leave Missouri. They move on again. And they go to this place in Illinois and they establish a new town. They call it Nauvoo, which is the Hebrew word for beautiful. That's what they call their town in Illinois. It's right on the Mississippi River. This town is still there today. There's a Mormon temple there and everything. And that's where they're going to settle down for a long time. They're going to be in Nauvoo. And the whole city it's pretty much exactly what Joseph Smith wants it to be. And the state of Illinois kind of allows that to happen. In fact, there's something that's passed by the legislature in the state of Illinois called the Nauvoo Charter that kind of allows the Mormon community to kind of do what they want. So Joseph Smith gets his theocratic society where the church is in charge. Joseph Smith is the mayor of the city. Kind of everything's under his control, and his influence starts to grow. So at this time, and kind of all throughout all this time, Joseph Smith is already sending out his Mormon missionaries, you know, the well-dressed guys that come and knock on your door. They're already doing that, already at this time, and they're doing it all over the world. So there are people coming to Illinois from Canada. There are people coming to Illinois from England. There are people coming to Illinois from all around the United States that are coming to join this movement, and it's growing. Joseph Smith, at this point in time, he's got his personal army that kind of keeps him safe. He's thinking of running for president of the United States. And the idea that when he becomes president of the United States is that this movement is going to spread. And it's going to spread throughout the whole country. That's kind of his plan. Things don't go so well for him, though, because as his influence grows, there are clashes, as there always have been before. And the clashes get worse and worse until finally Joseph Smith is arrested and taken to jail. And while he's in jail, he's going to be assassinated by a mob in 1844. So this is going to have obviously a very large impact on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because Joseph Smith was such a charismatic, such a powerful leader. Now that he's gone, well, what happens next? And there are a couple different people that argue over who should get to be the leader. The most prominent of them is going to be Brigham Young. So Brigham Young is going to be he's going to become the leader of the church for most of the church. Like I said, there are a few other groups that kind of splinter off. Joseph Smith's wife and their three sons, they're actually, I think they end up going up to Wisconsin, and they kind of start their own branch of the Mormon church. There are a couple other leaders that end up starting branches of the church, but for the most part, they're going to follow Brigham Young out west. And Brigham Young says, we're just going to walk until we get to where we need to go. So they leave Illinois in 1846, and on July 24th in 1847, they arrive in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Brigham Young says, this is the place, and that's where they settle down. July 24th is still a major holiday for the LDS community. They call it Pioneer Day. So that's when they celebrate their arrival in Utah. So that's kind of going to be their new promised land, where they're going to settle down and they're going to kind of form their community. And that community is, of course, still there today. There's a lot more history there to kind of how things have grown and changed. The influence that they've had and the clashes that have existed between the Mormon church there and the rest of the country. I heard about this when I went on a trip a few years ago to St. George, Utah. When I was a student at the seminary, I went on a mission trip to St. George to kind of help out one of a new Welsh church that was planted there. And one of the things I learned there was right outside of St. George, Utah, there was a pioneer caravan that was headed west. They just wanted to go to California. And when they got to St. George, Utah, the Mormons living there massacred them. Just massacred them. And yeah, because they were outsiders and this was their spot because Utah was theirs. And so at this point in time, Abraham Lincoln was president. And word got back east about what had happened. And Abraham Lincoln was gearing up to send the army out to take care of this, but he got a little bit distracted by the Civil War. And so it's interesting hearing people talk about this. It's somewhat likely that if the Civil War hadn't happened, the Mormon Church might not exist. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Anyway, the community there is, of course, is still very, very strong. The Mormon Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints, is still growing and expanding. One of the statistics I saw was by about 1 million members a year, because they're still doing all of their mission work. They're still a firm push of expansion, and that's the history there. Questions on that? Kind of a fast breeze through. Okay.
They may appear to grow, but once you get into the Mormon Church, they don't ever let you out. You have to, it takes an act of God to get your name off the rolls.
To get your name off the books?
Yeah, and they organize their, at least in California, they organize their wards by 100 families. But if you go through the 100 families, there might be only 25 that are active in that particular ward. The
Okay.
rest are just there. But they count them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were baptized today.
Yeah, we're getting to that.
Oh,
We're getting to that. Marianne said, while statistics might show they grow by the millions, part of that is because if you decide to leave the church, they still count you on their books. So, in any case. Talking about basic beliefs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, according to Joseph Smith and the Mormon Church as a whole, true Christianity died in the 2nd century. That very soon after the beginning of the Christian church, the truth was lost, and they will consider Christianity as a whole. Since then, the LDS community will refer to as the apostate church. The apostate church, like we are corrupted Christianity in their minds. Progressive revelation is a big deal with the Mormon Church. So for Joseph Smith, God would speak to him directly, and he would write down the revelations that God gave to him. One of the sacred texts that we're going to talk about is kind of just a collection of direct revelations that God has given. So through Joseph Smith, some of those revelations were given. He called himself God's prophet, and there have been prophets since then. So that revelations still come to the Mormon Church. And so even today, the higher up leaders in the Mormon Church will say that God is still progressively giving revelation to them. So while we say God speaks to us through his word, through the Bible, and everything that we hear, we want to test up against the Bible, they say, well, no, first of all, the Bible is corrupted. Second of all, God is still speaking to us. And if you look at some of the things that have been revealed in the past, they don't always add up. And quite often, revelations will change through time, so that if there was a revelation that was made 50 years ago that wouldn't be quite so popular today, probably there's going to be a new revelation that's going to undo that one. For instance, at the formation of the Mormon Church, people who were eligible for the priesthood and eligible to be bishops were white males. Now it's open to all males. But that wasn't always the case, depending on the culture and how things were. So this progressive revelation is something that they're very comfortable with and they embrace.
I heard Jesus said white males only.
So the sacred texts that they hold to, the Book of Mormon is number one at the top. This is what Joseph Smith wrote down or recorded from the golden plates. And essentially, the Book of Mormon, what it chronicles is the existence of the Jewish people in America. So, according to the Book of Mormon and according to the golden plates that Joseph Smith supposedly found, throughout the history of Old Testament Israel, there were three major migrations from the land of Israel across the ocean to America. So that there were branches of the Jewish people, tribes of the Jewish people that had settled in America and were living here. And the Book of Mormon follows them and what happens with them. And what happens with these two groups, or well, it ends up with being two groups. The Nephites and the Danites are the two major groups in this Book of Mormon, and they do not like each other. The Nephites and the Danites, they fight against each other. The person who wrote down this chronicle on the golden plates, his name was Mormon. That's what all this stuff is named after. Mormon wrote down the chronicle on the golden plates, and after Mormon died, he entrusted the plates to his son Moroni, and Moroni went and buried the plates before he was killed. And when Moroni was killed, he became an angel, and that's where the angel Moroni came from. He was one of these Jews who was living in America who was killed and then became an angel. So, no, Moroni is not an angel that we recognize. So that's the Book of Mormon. They recognize the King James Version Bible and only the King James Version Bible. And there have even been groups within the Mormon Church that have kind of adapted it and made their own version of the King James Version Bible, where they've edited it and they've said, okay, we took all of the parts of the Bible that were corrupted and we got rid of them and we fixed them. So if you ever are looking at a Mormon Bible, pay close attention for that.
Very similar. The same wording.
Who gets to decide what's corrupted? Just the higher ups get to just say, oh, that's corrupted, so we get rid of it.
Right.
The president
Mm-hmm.
of the council is.
And all of this is connected with the progressive revelation that they're receiving from God. Yeah, so that's all connected. Doctrine and Covenants. This is that book of direct revelations. So it's just what it says, Doctrine and Covenants. When God spoke to Joseph Smith directly, all of those things were written down. When God spoke to other people, those things were written down as well. So this book is a collection of those revelations that were given by God. And then the Pearl of Great Price is some more of that. It's also included in the Pearl of Great Price is actually some parts of the Bible that were revealed in their pure form. So it's parts of the Bible that were re-recorded in a way that's more accurate. So there's like the book of Abraham is in the Pearl of Great Price, telling the real story of how things really went for Abraham, and things like that are in the Pearl of Great Price. So a lot of their doctrines and the things that they believe are, of course, taken from these sacred texts. So the Mormon doctrine that so no alcohol, and also no hot beverages, so no coffee or tea. That's coming from Doctrine and Covenants. Those are like direct revelations that were given. A lot of those are drawn from these things. Another big belief for the LDS community is it's kind of summed up in this phrase that was actually spoken by a leader in the Mormon church in a sermon that he was giving. He said, "What man is, God once was. What God is, man can become." Okay, so this is kind of a big deal for them, that in their understanding of who God is, God used to be a man, but in living such a good and such a perfect life, when God passed from his life as a man, he was promoted and he became God that he is now, God of our particular planet. And there are a number of things from this that are true now. So for the Mormons, they are very comfortable saying that there is more than one God. Right? In fact, they'll say, yes, there's more than one God. They are not a monotheistic religion, more than one God. So that, too, our goal is eventually to become gods like he is. So in their understanding, when God became God, up in heaven, he started having spirit children, okay? And all of the people on earth used to be spirit children up in heaven. So every time a person is born here on earth, a spirit child from heaven, like that soul, is united with the human body here on earth. The two firstborn spirit children of this God are Jesus and Satan. So Jesus and Satan were spirit children up in heaven, and so when Jesus was born here on earth, like one of us, he was a spirit child from God, here to be a man in a special way, so that his suffering then saves us, but not in the same way as the Christian understanding.
So God just asking, does he have like a goddess that is having these children, these spirit babies?
He must, but we don't really talk about her.
So they say that Jesus and Satan were the first two
Mhm.
spirit beings. So where were they hanging out until they actually, or do they believe that they were just here from the very beginning?
No, they were in heaven.
They were in heaven. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
like Zeus.
Yes.
So did they believe in creation?
Yes.
And so this guy who once was a man but became God was able to create
After he became God, yes.
after he became God.
Yes.
Is he just the first person? Like, is it Adam?
So Adam was created, yeah, by God.
But
So when Adam and Eve were created, then they would have been spirit children that came from heaven.
so
Right.
so God was man first,
Mm-hmm.
but
Where'd
he
you come
lived
from?
on Earth.
Not this earth.
He lived on a different planet and died, and became God and created Earth.
And this is a cycle.
You have a bunch of.
So that's the first half of the phrase. What man is, God once was. Now you move on to the second half. What God is, man can become. So what we are now, God once was. And so now what God is, that is our goal to get there.
That's what they're doing. They're striving to become their own God.
So that one day, the new gods can create their own planets and inhabit them with their own spirit children.
Oh.
Right. That's kind of the goal. So that's where we're going here. That's the goal. And when they'll talk about this in different ways, right? When they talk about what's the goal, and we're thinking about the afterlife idea, there are a few different levels of what we would call heaven. They're going to give it a few different levels, and all people fit into these three different levels, okay? The top level, the absolute best place that you can end up with after you die, is called the celestial kingdom. So that's where God and Jesus are right now. And that's where all of God's spirit children are, is in the celestial kingdom. So if you are really, really good, if you do all the stuff you're supposed to do, you end up in the celestial kingdom where God and Jesus are. And only the people who are super good, like super, super good, they do a really good job, they're the ones that will later become gods. And then they will get to have their own planets that they get to inhabit with their own spirit children. That's the celestial kingdom. That's level 1. Level 2 is the terrestrial kingdom. It's still pretty good, but it's not as good as the celestial kingdom. The people that get to go here are people who were non-Mormons during this life, but after they died, they accepted the Mormon faith. And we're going to get to how they do that in a minute.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Level 3 is the telestial kingdom, and that's kind of the grab bag. Everybody else goes there. So people who reject the Mormon faith and everybody else go to the telestial kingdom. Now, some branches of the Mormon church will add a fourth level that they just call outer darkness. And when you're there, you're just out. That's like their equivalent of hell. But a lot of Mormons don't believe in a hell. They'll just say everybody else goes to the telestial kingdom. Deb.
I was saying, if they don't believe in hell, where does Satan live? Because you said that Jesus and Satan were the two first spirit children, so where does Satan live?
That's a good question.
That was last time.
I might get, maybe he might live in the celestial kingdom. I-
He's probably.
He's in the outer darkness.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to answer that question because I don't know the question, or I don't know the answer.
I really want to talk to your neighbor.
Half the Mormons don't even know anything.
Right. So again, take all this with a grain of salt, because just like every other religion we've talked about, there's a whole lot of variety for how much everybody believes. But this, what we're looking at here is just the official, this is what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints
This
teaches.
is like literally their doctrine.
Yes.
You are not making any of this up.
No.
Oh my gosh, you have little faith.
No.
That'd be you.
So you can see why when those guys come to your house and start talking, they don't talk about this.
No,
I mean, who in the hell believes this? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right. So
Well,
this is kind of, and they're good at it too, right?
Oh, very
So
good.
when the thing to be careful about when you're speaking to those missionaries that come to your door is they know how to use the right words. They use the same words that we use, but they use the words to mean completely different things, right? So that's kind of something to be thinking about. Anyway, that's your 3 levels of where you go after you die. How you get there, so if you want to go to like the tippy top celestial kingdom, this is what you need to do. This is where temple ordinances become really important. So all of those the Mormon temples that have the statue of Moroni up top with the trumpet facing up to heaven, you can't go into those temples. Absolutely not. They will not let you in. Most Mormons can't go into those temples. You need to have like a special like permission slip. It's called a temple recommends. And to get a temple recommends, you need to have an interview with the leader of your ward, that's like your local congregation, and also an interview with the local bishop. And you have to get this new every single year. It doesn't just carry over. And once you get that temple recommends, you can go inside the temple and do these temple ordinances that you need to do in order to be a tippy top Mormon.
So are there like, is there like a checklist from your ward that you have to have?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what all the criteria is, but it's really important. So when I was in St. George, we actually we talked to a couple of people who were former Mormons, but they left the church. And when you go to Utah, Salt Lake City and St. George, and these cities that are very prominently Mormon, the whole community is just entrenched in it. So that this one guy that we were talking to, he was a construction worker, and he said he couldn't get construction jobs unless he had a temple recommends. Like when he wanted a job, the employer said, "Where's your temple recommends card?" And if he didn't have it, they would not have hired him. So like, but it ends up being a lot of like just jumping through the hoops, right? So he could just go down to his ward leader and say, "Hey, I need my temple recommends," and the ward leader in this place would say, "Okay, here you go."
Oh.
That's not always the case, but
They didn't have to see the tax returns with the 10% donation? That's part of it.
that's, I'm sure in some places it is, but again, you've got variety in different places. Anyway,
Local rules.
when you're in there and you're doing the ordinances, what are they?
okay, that's where we're going. Great, keeping me on track. Okay, so induction is a big one. There's a whole ceremony where there's like you're anointed with olive oil, and you're given, it feels funny saying it, but it's true. They give you like special underwear that you have to wear all the time. And
In the temple,
in
All
what?
the time.
you all the time, like
All,
at home,
all the time.
they give you special,
Called magic underwear.
Yeah. Well, it's called the shield.
That's what my kids call it.
Right.
is it like fruit of the loom?
Oh no, it's special made.
Okay.
So they give you that. You are given a new name. And you're not supposed to ever tell anybody your new name, but this is your new name. Now, when you get married, the husband gets to know the wife's real name, but the wife doesn't get to know the husband's name.
What?
Can women go to the temple?
Yeah, can women go in?
If you've got your recommends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you're going to want to go to the temple because celestial marriage is a big deal. Okay? So that's another one of the ordinances is you can get married outside of the temple. Right? That's okay. But in order for your marriage to be eternal, you have to have it sealed inside of the temple. Okay, now this factors in really, really strongly with what we were talking about with the celestial kingdom and people becoming gods. If you want to do that, you have to do this. Okay?
Wait, if you want to go to the celestial
Kingdom.
thank you,
Mhm.
you,
You have to have a temple sealed marriage. Especially
if
if
you get married, do you have to be married?
I think so. That's what
Oh.
it seemed like.
Oh,
So yeah. If you're a woman, certainly you have to be married. Right? So the only way a woman is going to end up being in that God status is if she is married in the temple and her husband achieves that God status. What's the and?
And in order for her to get to heaven, he has to call her.
Right, that too. And he has to,
Just automatically go, he has to.
he's got to raise you up.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
Yeah.
I'm
So-
just saying.
Yeah, that's what's got to happen. Okay? If all of those things happen, you're married in the temple, your husband goes to that celestial kingdom, and he calls you to go there too, you're set for eternity. You're married forever, and you and your husband get to spend eternity having spirit children. That's the goal, and that's how you get there. So, celestial marriage is what that happens in the temples? I don't think so, but good thought.
I mean, it seems like the first God of this earth did, so.
Okay, the other thing that happens in the temple is baptism for the dead. If you are alive and you get baptized, it does not have to happen at the temple, but baptisms for the dead do have to happen at the temple. There's a special font that they have at the temple, and there's a whole ceremony that you have to go through to name the deceased person that you are baptizing into the Mormon church. And after that baptism takes place, that person gets to go to the terrestrial kingdom because they have now become part of the Mormon church, even after their death.
Oh, so that's just for people who aren't Mormons then?
Yes, if you were baptized Mormon during your life, you don't need this.
Okay.
So if Dawn dies and I'm like, she needs to be Mormon, I take her, well, not me because I'm not, but the Mormons take her body?
No. Her body stays in the ground. They take you, and you are baptized, and you say, "I'm being baptized for Dawn."
What?
Yeah.
So does it have to be a family member or a close friend?
Depends on who you talk to. Different places have different rules on this. For some places, it's got to be family. For other places, it doesn't. You can just name whoever you want. So I was reading, and reading about this. It was kind of crazy. Just a couple examples of people who have been baptized into the Mormon church. George Washington has been baptized into the Mormon church. Adolf Hitler has been baptized into the Mormon church at least twice. Those are the examples that I read. So yeah.
So you can just name window of the dead. They
Nope.
could just be dead forever, and
Mhm.
you can say, can you get baptized multiple times for different people?
Probably.
Oh
I
my
think,
God.
what was it? The Virgin Mary, I think, has been baptized into the Mormon church.
I bet she was thrilled about that.
Has Jesus been baptized? Well, no.
No, he's good.
Oh, he's already.
He's good.
He's already in there.
Got it, okay.
So that happens at the temple.
What about the apostles? Were they baptized into the church?
Probably.
Okay, good.
Well, that's before Christianity was gone,
Oh.
right?
They're only in the terrestrial kingdom.
Oh, well, Peter and.
Well, they might be in the celestial kingdom. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, so those temple ordinances are super important if you want to make it into the celestial kingdom, but also just the way that you live your life. Obedience becomes really, 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 really important. And so this is where your missionaries come in, the people that are going door to door. They're doing good for the church in their minds. They're doing their good works to be obedient, to earn their way up for the best situation that they can be in the afterlife. Ordination is part of this too. I forget what the age was that you're able to be ordained into the Aaronic priesthood. So they have two different priesthoods, the Aaronic priesthood and the Melchizedek priesthood. And I don't remember how old you have to be an Aaronic priest, but you can be ordained into the Melchizedek priesthood when you're 18. And when I say you, what I mean is a boy. So that's a really good thing. When you are ordained into the Melchizedek priesthood, you are an elder, and you can do certain things at your local ward. You can receive direct revelations from God if you're a higher up one. You're eligible to be added to the leadership of the overall Mormon church. So all of these things are good things, ways to do your good works to get that higher up position.
So pretty much everybody does that, I'm assuming? Like, why wouldn't you?
If you care about being Mormon, yeah.
Got it.
Again, remember, we're dealing with a large spectrum of people. Some that say, oh yeah, I'm Mormon, because my family's Mormon. But the really serious ones, yeah, that's what they want. Marriage and family is huge, kind of like what we said before. So the LDS community has a reputation of being family people, right? Being just generally good people with good families. There's a reason for that, and it's this reason, that they have to be. They have to be good people. They have to have good families. And it's true. For the most part, families that have a Mormon background, a lot of the time are very healthy families with very healthy dynamics. But there's a guilt trip behind that, where you have to, if you wanna get to where you're going in the afterlife.
And Mormons are just one man, one woman. Do they do polygamy? Are they polygamous? Yeah.
Yeah, I wondered if that question was going to come. So Joseph Smith received a revelation from God that polygamy was fine, right? His wife was not okay with that.
I cannot imagine she was.
But very soon after that, he received another revelation from God that said, okay, this one is specifically for Emma Smith. You need to listen to your husband or you're going to be punished.
Shocking.
Yeah. So when they got out to Utah, so Brigham Young is leading now. Brigham Young, I think I read he had 20 wives and 40 children.
40 children?
Yeah.
That's why things get so big because
Yeah. So they get out to Utah. At this time, Utah is only a territory. It's not a state. They wanted to become a state. But the United States kind of says, look, guys, if you want to be a state, you really can't do polygamy. And so they have a revelation from God that says, okay, no more polygamy.
It's so convenient how that works for them.
Right. So officially, the Mormon Church does not allow polygamy officially.
Okay.
But
It still happens.
it still happens, particularly in what are called fundamentalist communities. that are very, very traditionally Mormon. That's where you're going to have like your sister wife situations. Yeah. Where,
Pinedale.
what was that?
Pinedale.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a place where they all go.
Right. Yeah. So I actually I bumped into a couple of the fundamentalist people when I was in St. George. They're kind of fascinating to talk to. Deb.
So when the man goes to heaven and calls his wife, can he call all of his wives to be in heaven with him, or is it just the one who is the best?
Only the ones she wants.
The ones he wants, and they've got to be sealed in the Mormon temple. Yeah.
So it's just the ones that he wants to go there.
So if celestial marriage is required, but they don't recognize polygamy, will they do multiple marriages in the temple?
That I don't know.
I was just gonna say, like, they're obviously not being obedient if they got a revelation saying that you can't do polygamy anymore, but you're still doing polygamy, then obviously you're not being obedient. So you
So-
can't go to celestial, whatever. Right?
Remember, the church is splintered.
Okay.
So these fundamentalist groups, they have their own
They have
prophet,
their own- Okay.
and they say
And
that.
he said, no, actually, never
Yeah.
mind, like, we really can't.
So I think this might not be the case today. When I was in St. George, I know this was true, that the prophet for the fundamentalist Mormon church was in prison, and he was receiving revelations in prison. But so anyway, that's that. So that's kind of what you're dealing with there. Any questions on any of those things?
So many, but yeah. It's great.
You mentioned a fellow that had to have a temple recommended to get work.
Mhm.
We didn't Pocatello. Yeah, a lot of contractors here looking for work to build and do some facilities at the INEL. And they had their Thursday morning coffee clutch at 7 o'clock at the local coffee shop. Now, they couldn't drink coffee, of course, they all did. And all the guys that own the construction companies, I'm talking earth movers, dirt movers, dump trucks, all that kind of stuff. They get together and say, okay, who does not have work right now? And a couple put their hands up. And the bids would literally be raped. That whoever was either out of work or didn't have a job right now, they bid. And one, had to be one, they bid. And there'd be always two bids. They knew the federal rules were 3 bids. So you had to have 2 more bids, and they're always much higher.
To make sure that they got that work.
Right. And then the other part was interesting is, we always say, on all the bids, we did the should costs. We had engineers and stuff, should cost. Like you'd get a bid for, say, $50,000, $60,000, and the should cost is $27,500. Well, we just wouldn't accept the bids. I had a guy come into my office one day, and he said, when are you going to award me that contract? I said, oh, not. You have to go to the lowest bidder, federal law. I said, well, you better check it out again, be a little closer. Our should cost was $27,500, and you're at 60. No, we're just not gonna do the work. You have to do the work because you put it out for bid. No, we don't. I'm gonna sue you. Perfect. I'm all for it. I went to Lockheed, I said, do you know how big a corporation Lockheed Martin is? Do you know how many lawyers we have? They're high paid, high powered, and do you know where your court will end up getting taken to? Either DC or someplace, or,
Someplace that's not Utah.
Away from
somewhere in Idaho.
Or Idaho,
Someplace
yeah.
that's not Idaho. How many lawyers do you have and how much money do you have to spend? You can't do that. That's illegal. Sue me. It's okay. And we never heard from that again. They our spy inside the coffee clutch, the Thursday coffee clutch, told me that they figured out it was probably him. Telling me, it was really goofy.
Yeah, it's strange, kind of what a hold they have on their communities. That you really can't get work if you're not Mormon in some of these places. It's a little horrific.
The INEL was a big federal facility, Idaho National Engineering Lab. It's called anything before that.
Mhm.
If you weren't Mormon, you were not going to, if you got a job, they might give you a job occasionally, but you'd never be promoted.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll call it cult-like because, well,
It is a cult.
It is.
It is a cult.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the history and everything about how they would establish themselves someplace, they get moved out because they were, I assume because they were different, they created this. How much different is that from, say, the Amish that were in that area? The Amish were threatening?
the difference in the Amish is they're content to keep to themselves.
And
The
these
Am-
guys weren't.
Right.
They don't proselytize.
So for the Mormons, they're always wanting to bring in more. The Amish go and they make their communities and they stay in their communities. They don't want anything to do with you. Yeah, that's the difference. Good question though. Yeah. All right. Looking at now discussion questions. My first question then is what it's kind of interesting to draw the parallels. What similarities do you notice between Mormonism and Islam that we talked about 2 weeks ago?
The vision from the demons.
How it started.
Okay, very similar beginning stories with visions that started and visions that continue. That Muhammad would kept on having these continuing revelations.
Seems like they're pretty violent.
There's a violence factor that's involved. That there.
Probably not anymore, but I mean, Islam.
I don't
still-
know, I've been listening to this crazy podcast, and there was a couple of them on there that I was like, that's still happening today.
With Mormonism?
Yeah.
Really?
Mhm.
What?
I don't know anything about that, but
There's a podcast that's called Seven Deadly Sinners that I'm listening to, and it is just about how people like just use the Bible and make people believe terrible things, and people don't go back and check on it. So it's insane to me of what people will believe without going back to look at
Well,
it.
also, if you read some of the literature written by people that are no longer Mormon that have been inside the temple, they claim there's devil worship in there.
well, some of the symbols that they use are interesting. So that the pentagram, that's a pretty common symbol. From what I read, that symbol came out of the Masonic Lodge. Joseph Smith was a member of the lodge, and a lot of their ceremonies and the things that the secret ceremonies that the lodge does are similar to the induction ceremony that happens at the temple.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I think just the human element of Mormonism and Islam, but also the works
Oh,
piece,
yeah.
like what you do, that's huge.
Or the different levels too that they have.
Oh, yeah, like the levels.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're very, I don't know, it's the human thing. It's all human-based.
Yes. So there's an emphasis on works. Yeah, it's all very human based. I think in both religions, the women kind of get the short end of the
Oh,
stick.
That sounds great to me.
Well, they don't count for anything. I mean, did you, if I can remember correctly, didn't you say in Islam, they never talk about women going to heaven? They just
Right.
cease to exist. And here,
Except those golden raisins.
yeah, and here in the LDS religion, you can only get to heaven
If you're summoned.
if you're summoned by
Right.
a male.
Right. So yeah, just really interesting parallels there. It almost sounds like they come from the same source. Anyway, with all of that stuff now, all of those things that we've been talking about here, the things that the church believes, the things that the church does, and you want to ask the question, how do people become a part of this? Well, that's my next question here. What is it about Mormonism that keeps people in?
Family, yeah.
Guilt.
Okay, I think two great answers, family and guilt. The guilt aspect is huge.
I think guilt in general, we are so motivated and driven by guilt, even as Christians, even though we know those things are forgiven. And so imagine trying to leave the Mormon church and still feeling those feelings of guilt.
And how
Right.
do you even get out either after a while when you're marriage.
Right.
I mean, if it sounds like if you want a job, then you stay a Mormon, so you can.
Yes.
provide for yourself.
So the community aspect is huge. If you're going to be part of the community, you got to be Mormon. But let's talk about that family part too. I think there's really two reasons why family is a reason. Number one, people are attracted to that. They see how healthy Mormon families are, and they think, oh, there's got to be something about this, something that I want. And the other piece is, if you're in the church, if your family is in the church, you can't leave. They're going to cut you out.
Do they disown you? If you decide you're not gonna, yeah.
You show me.
The Mormon church is really good about taking care of their own too. We have a friend he was raised Mormon, left the Mormon church, and he is, in the last year or two, gone back to the Mormon church, and I asked him, I said, what is it about the Mormon church that draws you, you know? And he said, well, it's the way I was raised. He said, and they take care of me. They, you know, they're very attentive, you know, he has a physical or any kind of need, you know, they're right there to help him out, you know, and so they have their own community outside of
Social
just their,
services.
I mean, they're just, within their child church, they really take care of their own.
But then I've also heard that there's paybacks.
And there may be,
Yeah.
but I would say
If they
that's-
take care of
that's just-
you monetarily or help you out, you're expected to pay that back.
Well,
Yeah.
or do something.
Do something,
Yeah,
exactly.
because he's starting to feel that, because he said, they're starting to expect things of him
Mhm.
that are making him uncomfortable, but I think it's to.
Now, did he leave and then come back?
He left when he was pretty young. He's been married 3 times. Of course, that's, and divorced, that's not good, but and just in the last year and a half,
How old the fellow is this? How old the fellow is this?
He's 61.
Old.
Okay.
But yeah.
From-
He's
From what I've heard and read, if you walk away, they do not look kindly on that.
Can you join a different group of them, or do they keep pretty good records and have good records?
Yeah, and I don't know if it came from his mom, but I mean, it's like they sought him out. They started coming and visiting him.
Oh, so they want.
Well, he had some problems with drugs and alcohol, and he finally came clean, and then they started visiting him, and I don't know if it was through some of his support groups, that, I don't know how they got it, and I haven't asked him a lot of those kinds of questions, but yeah, they sought him out and pulled him back in.
I read something. I think I was in college. I don't exactly remember the details because this was a long time ago. But someone who had left the church, they wrote down about their induction ceremony at the temple, that it was a woman. She said that in the induction ceremony, they told her all of the bad things that would happen to her if she walked away from the church. Like things like her tongue being ripped out with hot pincers and things like that. Like, God's going to do this to you if you walk away from the church. So there's all of those factors. The good is good, but the threats, at least in this case, the threats were there. And again, that's not necessarily universal, but this is kind of how the church as a whole acts, that they treat their own very, very well. But if you reject them or if you walk away, that's bad.
That's another similarity between Mormonism and Islam.
Yes, yeah. So you find that same thing in Islam. So when you're dealing with people that are LDS, this is the kind of stuff that you're depending on how active and how serious they are. You're dealing with people that are entrenched in a community. In many cases, maybe they're very happy entrenched in this community because the community treats them well, or maybe they're afraid because they know that if they leave, that's going to be bad for them. All of these things are things that could be mixed in. Of course, every situation and every person is going to be different, but these are the kinds of things that you're going to come up against when you're talking to Mormons. So then this slide is getting going to be really familiar. Then how do we talk to our Mormon friends? Well, number one is going to be the same as it's always been. No matter who they are, no matter how far into the church they are, no matter what they believe about becoming gods of their own planets later on, that doesn't change the fact that they are still someone for whom Jesus died. Whatever they believe right now, Jesus wants this person in heaven. And so that's what we want too. And then just to listen to them, of course, as with everything else, there's a spectrum. When we talk to our LDS friends, we don't want to approach the conversation thinking, oh man, this person believes some crazy stuff, and I'm going to show them how crazy the stuff that they believe is. Well, we want to ask, like what Deb said, what do you like about being LDS? What is it about your church that means so much to you? And what makes your religion, like I just said, means so much to you? And listening to their answers, that means a lot. And then sharing the peace that you have in Jesus. Can I tell you what I like about my church? So that brings us to our practice questions. A few issues in the Mormon religion. Number one, God still gives revelations to his prophets today.
Jesus said on the cross, it is finished.
Okay, Jesus said it is finished on the cross.
And doesn't Paul say somewhere too that you should go back and like anything that you hear, you should go back and like compare it to the Bible and make sure that's really what they're saying. And if it's not, then it's not.
So in 1 John, we've got that test the spirits. Is that what you're thinking of? Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's a place in Paul's epistles that talks about that. The one that there might be though. I know Paul talks to the Bereans. When Paul preaches to the Bereans, they always go back to the Bible, and Paul commends them for that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Any other ones?
Pastor,
Cheryl.
there's a passage at the end of Revelation that talks about how we're not to add to or subtract from God's word. However, if Mormons don't give the Bible validity, that doesn't mean much to them. I know because I've tried it with them before.
Yeah, but you're right. The Revelation passage is a good one. The ones that I chose here were Hebrews, right at the beginning of the book of Hebrews. It says, in the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways, but in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. And then Jesus himself in John chapter 8, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. So the Bible itself puts the emphasis on what Jesus teaches. And when it kind of connects to what Don was saying about testing the spirits, when Joseph Smith says something that kind of clashes with what Jesus has said, we're gonna go with what Jesus says. Now, like Cheryl said, that's not going to mean too much to them because they believe the Bible is corrupted. But this is kind of the ground that we stand on the words of Jesus.
Here's the Book of Mormon. They have their Bible passages sound exactly like the King James Version. Do they have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the Book of Mormon?
No, because the Book of Mormon, remember, is all about the Jewish people in America.
Okay, no, so
In their KJV.
I'm just wondering what their comeback would be to the John 8:31. If you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples.
Well, they
They
probably
would say the prophet says.
yeah, their prophets are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I can see the comeback.
Right. It's interesting in the Book of Mormon and in other places where passages from the Bible are taken and ripped off and twisted. The best example that I can think of, and we'll get to this one in a minute here, in the book of Nephi, remember Ephesians chapter 2, for it is by grace that you have been saved through faith, and this not of yourselves. This is the gift of God, not from works, so that no one can boast. Beautiful passage talking about how our salvation is only by grace, not connected to our works. In the book of Nephi, it says, it is by grace that we have been saved after all that we can do.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, they take these things and they twist them around. It's really kind of a sad thing. How about this one? Our highest goal is to become what God is. How would you respond to that idea? And again, probably most Mormons that you talk to aren't going to talk this way, and they're not even going to maybe even know about this. But how would you approach this belief of the Mormon Church?
No other gods before me.
Ooh, look at that. I am the Lord and there is no other. Apart from me, there is no God. Isaiah 45.
I told you I would know some of these.
Yeah, that's great. Any others? I put down a verse from Revelation chapter 21. Revelation 21 gives us that beautiful picture of what our eternity is going to look like. This is God speak, or well, no, this is the angel speaking to John. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them, and he will be their God. So that our goal, the thing that we are looking forward to, is not to be God, but to be with God, to be with him in his presence. The God who has saved us, that we will be in paradise with him. Think of all the other things that Revelation 21 says. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. Beautiful promises about our relationship with God. That our goal is to live in the presence of our loving God, not to become gods ourselves.
Who would want to anyway? That sounds terrible.
What Jesus
That's 'cause
said
you're
on
a
the
woman,
cross to
not
the
me.
lady, today you will be with me in paradise.
Today you will be with me in paradise. Yeah. Good. The third one, last one, this is probably now the most important one. If you're speaking to your Mormon friends, this is really probably where you want to go. And that is the idea that salvation is gained through a life of righteous obedience. Where are you going to go with this one? Okay. That Ephesians 1?
I am the way, the truth, and the life.
I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So it's not through our perfection, but it is through Jesus. Good. When I was in St. George, the pastor at the church said the verse that he carries around in his back pocket is Hebrews chapter 10, verse 10. We have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. Whether they are prepared to admit it or not, serious Mormons deal with a lot of guilt. And there is a burden on them, particularly Mormon women, because they have to be perfect. They have to raise their kids the right way. They have to be perfect wives. They have to be righteous. They have to observe everything. And there's no guarantee. There's never a time when you are able to say, I am perfect, I've done enough. You can never know. But here in Hebrews 10, we do know. We have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. That as Christians who rely on the death and resurrection of Jesus, we are able to say, I am perfect. I know where I'm going to be after I die. I know where I'm going to spend my eternity. Not because I've been a perfect parent or a perfect spouse. I know that I haven't been. But because my Savior Jesus has done that for me, that's peace that they don't have.
Pastor?
Kevin?
Yeah, so what would they say if you asked them about the thief on the cross that Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise?
I don't know what they would say. I don't know. That's a question that you can ask. I would suspect not everybody would say the same thing. But I think that's a valuable thing to bring up. That sinful man on the cross who recognized he was sinful, Jesus gave him that promise. That's similar to the other passage that I pulled out, 1 Timothy chapter 1. This is Paul speaking. Here is a trustworthy saying that is worthy of full acceptance. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the worst. So we can stand with Paul and we can say, I am the worst sinner there is, but that doesn't matter because Christ Jesus came into the world to save the worst sinners. That's what we rely on. And that's the piece that we have to share. So yeah, Kevin, the thief on the cross is, I think, a great place to go. Other thoughts? Marianne.
I used to think that, I've always, spent probably the last 10 years seeing the resemblance between Islam and Mormonism. I used to think if they ever got together, they're all in trouble. Now I know they're trying to kill each other. So I don't have to worry about that. No, the Muslims wouldn't accept the Mormons because they think they're going to be God. There's only one God in Islam. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to worry about that.
That'll be fine. So when those missionaries come to your door and they knock on the door, I know a lot of people ignore them or whatever, and I guess that's fine. But invite them in. Be nice to them. Show them love and talk about these things. They have their agenda, their list of things that they want to talk to you about. But this is where we can go with them to show them, hey, you're on a treadmill that's never going to end. And God doesn't want you on that treadmill. Jesus doesn't want you on that treadmill. He wants you in heaven. To share with them the peace that they have. They're really good at smiling. They're really good at acting like they're happy where they are and they feel good about themselves, but the guilt is there. And we have the solution to it. So
I think there was one time that somebody had the Mormons into their house, they didn't remember, and they invited them in, and like, can you hold on for a second, and I'll pass your clothes. Over and talk to them.
I've heard of pastors getting blacklisted.
Oh,
After a couple of times when the missionaries come, they stop coming.
yeah.
And they'll never come again because they say, don't go to that house. We don't want you talking to them. Yeah.
This about that book, Passage of Time, about a Mormon missionary who thinks he's going to convert this Baptist preacher. And I guess that other thing happened.
Okay.
Just
Oh, I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, a long time ago, Sunday morning, and we had some Mormon missionaries come to our door. My dad, is pastor, and they came to the door, and I answered, and I'm like, Mom, what should I do? She said, invite him to church. I said, we got church going on next door. You want to come? They laughed. They were in our house again.
Yeah.
One thing you didn't mention is now they have, I don't know if it was a revelation or what, but now they have female missionaries.
Is that a new revelation? So I knew they had
Yeah.
I knew they had female missionaries. I don't know when that started.
We were in the state of Denver Airport the other day. There were a couple.
Yeah, girls have to be 21 or 22.
Okay.
And they came from school too.
Yeah. Anyway, I've pretty much squeezed out everything I know about Mormonism, but if you have any questions, I can do my best, or I'll just tell you that I don't know. What else are you wondering about?
Okay, I got one.
All right, Kevin.
So if God was promoted from man, who did the promoting of God?
Whoever was God before him, I would guess. Because
Yeah,
you
I
if
think you have the answer. The logic seems kind of,
right.
it's
Yeah. If you think about the cycle, what man is God once was, what God is man can become, you've got to think that God is not the beginning of that cycle, right? So if you track it back, and again, I'm speculating right now. I have not read this. I have not heard this from anybody. But I guess I would guess that God himself at one point would have been a spirit child for somebody else. But I don't know. And then how far back does it go? Does that just go back forever? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they would trace it back or if they would.
yeah. Or how could they,
Yeah, I don't know.
Pastor.
Cheryl's got a question.
Well, I just have a comment. It's extremely difficult to speak with Mormons about Jesus and who he really is because their understanding of Jesus is so different from ours. They just do not see him as the Son of God. He's just a Son of God. And
Mhm.
they don't recognize what the work that he did for us, his perfect life and his sacrifice, the way we do. They just see it so differently. It's extremely challenging to speak to them. It really is.
It is. It is absolutely true. And understanding that the Mormons who are serious about being Mormons, they don't. I mean, nobody wants to be converted, but they really don't. They are stubborn. We're going to see the same thing next week when we talk about Jehovah's Witnesses. They're very much the same way. That they are well educated in what they believe, and they want to stand on that. When I was in St. George Sunday, on Sunday, we went to a Mormon ward. I went with a few other seminary guys, and oh, they were excited to see us. It was four guys in their mid-20s sitting in the pew. So after the service, they descended on us, and they wanted to know where we came from and what we were doing, and if we wanted to be Mormon. And they were a little bit less excited when they found out, oh, we're just four guys training to be Lutheran pastors. But we went to Sunday school, and they have when they do Sunday school, they divide up into their own little groups, and we were in one little group in a classroom, and I don't even know what they were supposed to be talking about, but they put their topic aside, and they devoted their Sunday school hour to just talking to us about the Mormon Church and what it teaches. And we kind of made them a little bit mad.
I can't imagine.
That's interesting because our sons ran around with little kids.
Mhm.
And occasionally, if we went away for the weekend, they stayed with the family and went to church. And their comment was always, they wanted to know what we believed.
Really?
Oh, yeah, in their Sunday school, they wanted to know what we believed.
Okay. And again, that's a different things in different places. But so I think, Cheryl, with that, it's difficult talking to them. I think you're right. And that's where, like, maybe you have better luck with someone that you have a relationship with. If you've got a friendship with someone, or this is not going to happen on one conversation. This is an ongoing thing to be patient with them, to listen to them, to love them, and to just continue sharing the peace that you have, and praying that the Holy Spirit will work through that. It's frustrating, and it takes a really long time, but
I think what I was gonna say was that it seems like this particular religion, obviously, yes, we always want to focus on Jesus, but it seems to me like actually cracking the egg there is the guilt piece. Really hitting on the human emotion of the peace that we have. Obviously, that's because Jesus died for us and because of his prominent figure, but like really honing in for them, you don't need to feel this way.
right.
And trying to really dig into that piece rather than say, no, Jesus is more prominent than you believe he, you know what I mean?
Right. Right. Well, and I think with all of these things, when you're talking to people that believe different things, it's so easy to allow a discussion to descend into an argument where it's just back and forth and back and forth. I need to prove to you that I'm right, and I need to win with my well-crafted argument, and you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to, they're not going to listen to you. So that patience piece, and I think you're right, Lauren, that sharing the peace that we have, just in an ongoing way, I think that that's what we're called to do. So
And that's what Jesus would have done.
yeah.
He would have patiently loved them for that.
Yeah.
I guess I can't say for sure.
Anything else? All right, then let's close with prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, we thank and we praise you that you have made us perfect, that there is nothing more that we have to add. There's nothing that we have to do. We don't have to lie awake at night wondering if we're good enough, because we know that even though we are sinful, you have forgiven all of our sins. You have won a place in heaven for us, and that is what we have to look forward to. As we live in that peace and that confidence, give us the strength and the ability to share what we know with the people that you put into our lives, especially our Mormon neighbors. Allow us to give them the peace that you have given to us, so that they might be unburdened and so that they might share with us in the eternal glory that you have prepared for all who believe in you. We ask it in your holy name. Amen. All right. Thank you all for your time tonight. Like I said, next week we'll be talking about the Jehovah's Witnesses. So we'll see you then.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. All right. And good night, everyone.